Hi, welcome to the Franchise Q&A session. My name is Rachel Wenham and I will be your host today. Before I introduce our experts, I would like to say a massive congratulations to the winners of the Top Franchise Award 2018, including Pink Spaghetti, Mumbler, Funfest Franchising, Rachel Davis from Turtle Tots, and of course our overall Top Franchise Award winner, The Creation Station. To view all our winners, please follow the link on this page. And a huge thank you to our sponsors, HSBC and EWIF. And to all those who entered, the judges read some fantastic entries and some truly inspirational stories. Moving on to why we are here today, the experts on Workingmums.co.uk often get asked a number of questions from franchisors and franchisees. This is why we are having the Q&A, to help you to get some fresh ideas around growing your business and the things you need to consider when doing so. I would like to introduce our experts. We have Adam Knight, our social media expert from Coconut Creatives, Bal Kaur, our financial expert from HSBC, Amy Leahy, our legal expert from Aquabridge Law, and Steph Gutman from EWIF, encouraging women into franchising. Thank you to those who have submitted some great questions already. We'll start with these. In the meantime, please ask our experts anything around these areas. You can ask a question in the chat box to the right of your screen, or if you're watching on a mobile device, you will see a question mark. Simply click on this. First up, we have a question for Adam from Claire, who asks, what's the best way to use Facebook for publicising the classes that I run? I post on selling sites and will occasionally boost events.
Hi, Claire. I think really it comes down to the targeting that you use and the type of classes you're running. I think one of the really important things with when we're putting the ads together, particularly on social media, so this is kind of regardless of whether it's Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, is to really think about who your ads are targeted at. So what we do at Coconut is to basically like create a profile of somebody. So we kind of say, like, what's your absolutely 100% ideal customer look like, and almost to the point of giving them a name, how old they are, where they live, that kind of stuff, so that when you're writing the text of your ads and choosing images, you're really kind of targeting it towards that particular type of person. Because one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is when they're sort of trying to write something for everybody, it kind of doesn't speak to anyone. So the more kind of targeted that you can be in terms of the creative and the ads, I think is a really good thing to do. In terms of just publishing them as events on social media as well, on Facebook, I think that can be very beneficial. And the other thing as well is showing the benefits of what you're doing. So if you have some testimonials and case studies from people who've been, that's a really good thing to use, particularly if depending on whether you're doing retargeting or not using social media. Then you can you can follow, once people have come and sort of seen your stuff in the first instance, you can then follow them around with some ads that just show the benefits of what you do, and the sort of people that you help with it. So that would would be my first point on it.
Thank you, that's brilliant, Adam. I've got another one for you actually from Sarah, who asks, do you think spending time on social media is worth it? I'm finding it hard to measure, so want to be reassured that the time is well spent.
Okay, the answer to this question is probably quite long in general, but I think I've sort of tried to boil it down to a couple of points, which is it's definitely worth it, but only if you're kind of spending it doing the right things. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time on social media feeling busy when they're not necessarily kind of being hugely productive and working towards, whatever your kind of business goals are. So one of the key points we try to get across, particularly with when the businesses that we work with are looking at their kind of in-house social media that they're running, is to really focus on the amount that you post. So we have a ratio that we try and use and suggest to people, which is sort of out of every 10 things that you post, try and answer for about 6 of them, try and answer the people that you talk to as prospects and your kind of potential customers. They usually have frequent, most people call it a frequently asked questions. So things that, they will, if they have a problem, then they, sorry, I'm not phrasing this very well. If most companies' marketing should be based around the questions that people ask them and how they're going to solve the problem for them. So if you make about 60% of the content that you produce and the social media you produce answering those questions and showing examples of how you've solved those problems for people, that's a really good thing to do. We suggest using about 30% or 3 out of 10 for using proof, so like case studies and testimonials, and then one really strong, clear sales message of, come and buy this thing now. So that gives a little bit of a framework to produce content in. So rather than just being on social media and replying to lots of messages and posting lots of kind of abstract and different things, it gives you a little bit of a framework to kind of work within. It's definitely worth it. It's a bit of a technical issue, but so this is something that if anyone wants the sort of definitive answer, we can we can provide the information afterwards if you leave details of that. But one of the key things is if you're doing stuff on social media and linking people back to a website, you can use things called tracking codes. And it's really useful for social media, because if you are putting links to your website or links to different things that you're doing online, and you're using something like Google Analytics, it basically means that you can directly see what posts are generating what traffic, and you can be very granular with kind of how successful things are being. I can provide kind of details of how to do that afterwards, but yeah, that's it's definitely worth it, but done in the right way.
That's brilliant, thank you. I'm sure lots of people find that really useful. The next question we have is for both Belle and Amy, and Dean asks, should a franchise total be followed up by a monthly fee, or is a one-off payment better? Otherwise, how do you continue to profit unless you are selling products too? Belle, if we go over to you first.
Okay. Well, we would think that first of all, if it's a new franchise, or by the sounds of it, it sounds as though it's a potential franchisor that's asking the question. And we would think that if they've got a unique selling point, such as a business in the box, then you would think that they would need to provide the ongoing support as well. So you would think that for the franchise fee and to have an ongoing management service fee would be viable. Typically, we normally see a management service fee between the range of 6% to 10% on an ongoing basis. So, and that needs to be tailored into a business plan for their franchisees as well. So you would think that the ongoing support is what would actually give them the benefit of having the profits. However, they don't want to actually make it into a profit business, because at the end of the day, they want to support their franchisees going forward. Unless they're actually providing a specific brand, which is going to be specifically labelled with that franchise itself. So say, for example, they're going to have a buying group for that specifically can only be bought through the actual brand itself. So that is one way of them actually generating another income stream from their franchisee, so that they can only do the buying through the franchisor itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's brilliant, thank you. And Amy?
Yeah, so similar to what Belle was saying, actually, the franchise agreement itself would usually have a number of fees set out. So you would generally have your initial fee, so that's the fee the franchisee pays for the right to use your brand, your system, your method, the business in a box. So that's an upfront one-off fee, so for the right to use the license. Thereafter, there would usually always be what's called a royalty or a management service fee. That would be a monthly fee payable either as a percentage of gross income, so a percentage of the amount that the franchisee makes on a gross basis per month. Other people do it where it's subject to a minimum. So you might have a minimum of £250 a month, or 8% of gross turnover, or Other franchisors would just have a set fee of, say, £300-400 a month plus VAT for the management service fee that they provide to the franchisee. And that is, in my experience, that there is quite a bit of profit in the management service fee.
Mm-hmm. Can I just dip in there again, because as a bank, we tend to see that a majority of the franchisors will normally use a percentage, whereas when it comes to a set fee, it's almost like in case of the franchisee doesn't make any money or any return in the first month, but they're still liable for making that set arrangement payment to the franchisor. It just makes it a little bit more difficult for the franchisee, especially at the outset when they're starting the business. Whereas when it's a percentage of the turnover, it almost kind of makes sense, because it's as though that the franchisor is then sharing the risk with the franchisee as well.
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Amy and Val. And the next question I have is for Steph and Amy. So Steph, if we go to you first, Nadine asks, she says that she's adapted a concept to use in a workshop, but she's unable to travel the country to deliver it. She suspects she can do that through franchising the course, but what stops people from doing the training with her and then going it alone?
Okay, so this is a real fear for a lot of people starting out in franchising. I know that Amy will speak in more detail about the legalities around this, particularly with regard to the agreement, but ultimately you can't really stop people from doing something like that. But what you can do is safeguard and protect your idea and your business plan. And what people are buying into with you as a franchisor and the franchise that you are offering is you, your expertise, your knowledge, your experience, your business model, the market research that you've done, the history that you've got. That is what you're selling. It's more than just a business idea. It's a whole range of elements that incorporate into that. And people who are stepping out on their own, the hardest thing sometimes is the market research that goes behind it, what's really going to work, what's not going to work. And these are all things that you're presenting to them before they register for the idea and the concept that you're selling. So yeah, I mean, you know, you are your business model and you are your franchise, and it's kind of allowing people to understand who you are, your experience, your knowledge, and giving them limited bits of information as appropriate until they sign the contract.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much. Amy?
Yes, so as I understand it, the question is about why could people not do the training and then sort of take the idea and do it themselves? At the point of training, the prospective franchisee should have signed the franchise agreement, so training shouldn't be provided prior to the franchise agreement having been signed. The franchise agreement would contain all sorts of protection for the franchisor in respect of a franchisee not being able to replicate the system, copy the system, use it for their own benefit going forward. There'd be confidentiality terms which would all tie in with what that franchisee couldn't do. There would also be restrictions that would apply after the franchise agreement comes to an end as well. So if, for example, someone signs up for 5 years or potentially 2 years and then decides they're going to go off and replicate and copy the system, there would still be protection for the franchisor post termination in terms of restrictions that prevent that franchisee from operating a similar or competing business within the territory. Usually duration of that restraint would be for 12 months. But the clauses that prevent someone copying or replicating your system don't have a time limit on them. So they couldn't just take your documents, change the name on them and do the same thing without there being recourse in damages and potentially court injunctions to prevent someone from doing that. But that's why it's so important that people don't give away all of this information prior to someone signing the document, because otherwise things like this do happen. Also, if someone wants some more information on the system, on the methods, etc., you can have a non-disclosure agreement up front with a confidentiality attached to it if they're not ready to enter into the full franchise agreement. But generally, you wouldn't be training anyone until they'd signed the agreement and committed to be a franchisee.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Amy. The next question I have, I'm not sure, I think Bal must be having some internet issues. We'll try and get Bal back. But for now, I think it would be good to get Adam and Steph's opinion on the next question from Anna. And she says, we have a really great franchise package and a proven business model. Our problem is brand awareness. We are only known in the 2 areas where our current franchises are operating. What is the best tool to use to make people aware of our package?
Steph, do you want to go first, or should I go first?
Sorry.
That's all right.
I'll go first. As like Adam had mentioned earlier in a previous question, the first thing we need to do is to work out who it is you want to target. You've got the great package, you've got the, the franchise established, but being able to make people aware, you've got to know who it is that you want to attract and the type of person that you want to attract. We do something and we encourage people to actually create profiles of people that they want to target, and have an idea of their interests, their passions. You're not just kind of thinking, oh, I want someone in their 30s to 40s who is a homeowner, who's got kids, but you're kind of thinking wider than that. Where are they going to be hanging out? What platforms are they going to be on? What are they going to be attracted by? What are going to interest them? And it's kind of, using the packages and the platforms and the systems that are available to get their attention. And it doesn't have to be, as Adam mentioned earlier, it's not just about recruitment and sales all the time. You've got to, flesh out what it is your messaging is. Use humour, use videos. Videos is really crucial at the moment, and we're seeing a lot of increase in the number of videos that are being used online. So that's like quite a key marketing strategy that a lot of people miss out on. And I'm sure Adam can kind of go into a little bit more detail with that.
I think in terms of it of being the best tool, I think it really comes down to the kind of things that you're wanting to target as well. So it's quite a big subject.
No, sorry,
but
I don't know what happened there. A bit of technology blip.
Oh, don't worry. Welcome back.
That's okay. So it really comes down to the sorts of things that you're wanting to target, and different platforms do kind of offer different options. So, for example, like so on Twitter, for example, it's really easy to follow, to find people that follow certain other Twitter accounts. So, for example, we've had a customer of ours who does very well because they are a professional organisation, and there's a very big regulatory body that everyone is kind of that sort of follows and obviously looks at for guidance and legislation. So they just kind of target pretty simple ads at people who follow that particular professional body, and they get a phenomenal amount of leads and a really good uptake on their franchise for that. With Facebook, it's a little bit, you have got interest targeting in Facebook, which gets very detailed, but also in terms of demographics, it's the one where you can really kind of really hone in on exactly the sort of people that you want to target, geographically as well, and then psychometrically in terms of the things they like. Is available on Facebook. With things like LinkedIn, it's much more about the skills and qualifications and experience that people have in certain industries. So it does depend on those targeting bits. So it does go back to, like Steph was just mentioning, and I mentioned earlier, about creating those kind of profiles and really having a good idea about who it is that you want to speak to. Because if you can define that in a really, really strong and clear way, that will then inform almost, which platform it would be best to target them on.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Can I just kind of add a little bit more? I mean, a lot of it, obviously, we're talking online, but don't forget about good old-fashioned face-to-face networking, and going out and, being where people are in order to be able to promote who you are and your business, and, getting out to other areas and looking at, networking, business lunches. EWIF do a number of events, and obviously the BFA do a number of events, and you can kind of, get involved in those and meet with other people and share the idea beyond where you already are.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I was going to say, Anna, perhaps we could catch up afterwards as well and see if there's anything that we can do to help you. The next question I have is for Steph and Adam, and it's from Claire, and she says, where is the best place to advertise low-cost franchises with small budgets? Her target market is back-to-work mums and graduates. The franchise fee is £3,000, but they're offering a pilot scheme for £1,500. Go to Steph first.
I think, you know, it's kind of similar to what we were just saying, is, you know, using the ads, and by having a clear strategy of who you want to target, the key messaging that you want to put out there. So obviously you want to attract back to work mums. So where are they? Where do they hang out? Obviously you've got Working Mums as a, you know, one platform. You've got eWork as another platform. But you've also got, like, you know, there's Mumsnet and all that kind of stuff where the mums are hanging out and they're discussing and they're looking at ideas and they're sharing ideas. And then with graduates, they're attracted by the lifestyle potential, you know, and the idea of being able to do something that's worthwhile. That's kind of like a bit of a buzz thing at the moment, is I want to do something that's worthwhile, that's going to be able to help others, but also is going to make me look good, and, you know, all that kind of thing. So again, it's looking at where they are, and obviously a lot of young adults are hanging out on Instagram and they're attracted by the photos, the lifestyle, and being able to see what they could potentially, so they can put themselves in that position and in that place for them, you know, from your images and from your messaging, they put themselves there and they think, yeah, this could be for me. So it is definitely having the right messaging for the two different audiences. You can't do the same messaging for both. You've got to do two different messages.
Thank you. And Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't add a huge amount more to that, really. Other than, I mean, in terms of budgets, you know, I think Facebook have, I think their minimum, it depends on the type of campaign that you're running, but I think their minimum is something like £1 a day. I think on Google you can go down to anything like 20 to like 50p a day. You don't have to have a massive budget on any of the online platforms for advertising, at least. I know there are obviously like all the directory websites as well, which do usually have kind of cost-based categories, and I think they go from sort of, you know, £250 a month ish. I don't deal with that usually, to be honest. I do focus more on the paid advertising side, so I keep coming back to it. But yeah, it doesn't, you don't have to have massive budgets to get your message in front of the right people. If your targeting's there and you're being really specific and really focused, then yeah, you don't have to spend a fortune on it. But obviously if you're trying to compete in the, you know, funnily enough, there's only actually about 10 to 15 really strong keywords, for example, on Google AdWords, that people search for business opportunities and franchise opportunities. That it's actually a really small group, but obviously there's so many people bidding on them that they're quite expensive to go on. You know, again, we've got some clients who are getting really good success on very specifically, you know, they're in the accountancy world, so they're bidding on sort of accountancy franchise, those kind of things, and they're getting a much lower kind of cost on those because they're being much more specific. So I think, again, it does come down to that sort of targeting and who you're going after and where they might be.
Can I just mention that as part of the bank as well, it's probably worth you engaging with your local branch if you have got a business account with your local branch, because even the branches do local initiatives as well, where they help you promote your businesses in the branches. So at the moment with HSBC, we're actually hosting an event in June for local businesses to come forward, and they can have a table in the local branch, and they can then promote their businesses, and it's for free.
That's brilliant, thanks Val. And also Claire, if you want to catch up afterwards and see what we can do to help you target our audience, then obviously more than happy to do that. The next question is back to you, Val, actually. It's from Sarah, and she says that she's thinking of exporting her franchise model, and what financial issues should she consider?
Okay, So, hi Sarah. So basically, well, first of all, I would think that you definitely need to look at the local compliance, whichever country you're looking to export to, because it will be very different to the UK. So you'd have to kind of consider the cost implications of sourcing your products, whatever your brand is out there. But depending on if HSBC has a connection there, we will certainly be able to assist you. But if we don't, then it'd have to be locally approved by the local branch itself. So I suppose you need to kind of consider what the costs are, what the buying power is, what the demand is in the local area, wherever you're looking to operate, and go according to that, what the market research is as well.
That's brilliant, thank you. I've got another question for you now, Bao, actually.
Okay.
How do I work out a reasonable cost for a franchising arrangement?
Okay, so gosh, to work out a reasonable cost for a franchising arrangement, I would think, well, first of all, again, you would need to kind of establish what it takes, how much it costs to actually put everything together. So you'd need to kind of consider the training and the training, the brand itself, how much time you need to invest in the business with that particular franchisee that you're looking to take on. I think it's basically just kind of putting your business plan together and just to outline all the costs that are involved in setting it all up, and then perhaps discuss or consider what the arrangement needs to be according to that. So I would think it's almost like putting your franchise fee together. But in terms of putting your franchise fee together, you need to kind of understand exactly what's going to be involved in training, in the product itself, the ongoing support that you need to provide. And I would think that is how you would actually consider what your arrangement is going to be.
Okay, that's brilliant, thank you. Steph, I've got one for you next. Suzanne asks, what are you seeing as the trends in women in franchising? Is there a pattern in the types of franchises they are attracted to?
Okay, so ERIF has been around for about 10 years. Well, not about, definitely for 10 years, we're celebrating. And we are seeing an increase in women entering into franchising as a whole in the UK. In fact, the UK is doing slightly better than Australia and America in terms of the percentage of women that are involved in franchising, which is, yay, really good. But what we're seeing as well is that some of the big brands, I was speaking with one of the big brands earlier in the week, and she was saying that of their franchise network, only 11% are women. So you can still see there's still a big gap in terms of where women feel most comfortable and where they want to be and where they feel they can get involved in. But what we're seeing is that obviously women are a lot more driven by external factors like family and wanting flexibility to be able to work around that. And what we're seeing is a lot of the ERIF members and the women that we speak to are kind of going into the lifestyle franchises, you know, the ones that are like pets and kids and gardening and home stuff and that kind of thing. That's the lifestyle brand that they can do around the family, around their time, around their own schedules. But what we're also seeing is that there's a rise in the care market. There's a lot more women who are taking on the management element and thinking beyond just doing to actually managing, and care is where they're gravitating towards. And then on the other side of management is some of the white collar, you know, the consultancy and the professional like accountancy and that kind of thing. Again, there's starting to be more of an increase in the women who have been involved in those as well. And for quite a few of the members of EWIF, what they've done is they've started in lifestyle and they've taken that and they've built it, and then they've gone from lifestyle to management. So they've built their own business up to become a management, and then they've outsourced it to their franchisees as well. So there's kind of, you know, a lot of development for women within that, you know, over the last 10 years specifically.
That's brilliant, thank you. Next question is for you, Amy. Caroline asks, I have a franchisee who is moving abroad and wants to consider franchising from there. I operate a messy play franchise What legal issues do I need to consider?
Okay, so they would need to consider what the model was going to be for taking it abroad. So whether or not the current franchisor was going to grant a master license to that franchisee to operate in whichever country it is they're moving to. In that scenario where you grant a master license, you grant a right to operate in the entire of a country usually. So if that person was going to take the entire of the rights for the country and then effectively act as the franchisor, so then they can appoint sub-franchisees in that particular country, or whether or not this person is just talking about wanting to operate it in a certain area in that particular country, more like a traditional franchise but in the other country. They need to consider if there are any legal or regulatory requirements in the other country, depending. I mean, obviously this is a messy play type business, so what kind of regulations are there in terms of any childcare things, child related issues. They would need to have the franchise agreement subject to English law, so that any disputes arising out of the franchise agreement are dealt with here rather than being under the jurisdiction and law of a different country. The franchisor would need to think about how they're going to support that particular franchisee in the other country. So obviously they would still have obligations in their agreement in terms of advice, support, guidance, etc. Is it possible? What's the time difference? How's that all going to work? What if there are problems with the franchise in the other country? How are those kinds of things going to be dealt with? They'd need to think about protection of the brand. So how does trademarking in the other country work? Are there likely to be any issues in relation to protection of the brand there as well? So it's really having enough structure in place to be able to move something to another country, how you want to do it, and also how you're going to deal with bringing the income from that franchise back to the UK, because obviously the franchisor in the UK is still going to want to be earning. Are there any taxation issues? Are there any issues with bringing that money back into the UK as well? So it's a big consideration moving things abroad.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. I've got another one for you, Amy. Mel says that she wants to start offering maternity cover in the franchise contract, and what does she need to consider?
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear about that question actually, because it's something, as you know, I wrote an article for you on not so long ago, and it's had loads and loads of views actually. So that's really good. So in terms of maternity cover, this is not something that's generally been done in franchising, and I know there's now a trend towards people saying, come on board with us, and these are the kind of family friendly type franchises that we were talking about a short while ago. So childcare things, messy play, that kind of thing, are moving towards saying that we're family friendly, we can work around you, take one of our franchises, and we'll help you out with things. So in terms of maternity cover, I think you need to think about logistically how it's going to be done, because it hasn't really been done in franchising before. So and in terms of how it's going to be done logistically, how it's going to be done. So do you have enough franchisees in adjoining territories that the plan would be an adjoining franchisee would start taking the work for that territory whilst the franchisee was off on maternity leave? Would it be a head office issue? So would head office be actually providing the cover? Would it be a matter of getting a manager in place to do that? Who would be paying for that? Does the business make enough money to pay for that? You need to consider things like how would the fees work? So would the franchisee who is on maternity leave still have the benefit of part of the fees? If so, would they be required to do anything for those? Or would it be a maternity leave where they're completely away from the business for 6 or 12 months? So it's all about working out logistically how it's going to work, and then putting that into clear terms in the franchise agreement, because for it to work properly, there needs to be proper terms governing how it's going to work. Otherwise, it's going to be an area for dispute, because people are saying, well, I thought I got 60% of the fees arising from this. You know, does the franchisor get any of it if they're not providing the support from head office for the cover? So it's all about how it works, and then kind of the legal side of it then follows with the drafting and making sure that, you know, the franchisor isn't opening themselves up by trying to be helpful to people, aren't opening themselves up to potential claims. So it still remains to be seen kind of how it's going to work logistically and how we can draft that into franchise agreements. But it's a step in the right direction, definitely.
Brilliant, thank you. Adam, I've got a question from Sally, who says that she's getting a little bit confused with Facebook. She's been told not to add links to post, as Facebook then block out posts into feeds. Is it correct? And if yes, and she can't add links back to the site, is it worth spending time on it?
Can you just repeat the first part of that again? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. So Sally says she's getting a bit confused with Facebook. She's been told not to add links to posts, as Facebook will block this from posts and block these posts in feeds. So is it worth doing still if she can't link back to the site?
I've not heard a huge amount. I've not heard anything in that context. The thing that I have seen that they have introduced recently is to do with having to verify a domain. So one of the big problems that Facebook have had is that people essentially, particularly it's particularly to do with the political stuff that's been going on, both in America and in this country, where and the big fake news kind of phenomenon that has sort of got into the media, in that what people would do is share a link to a website and then change the information or write something that's quite contradictory, because obviously, a lot of people don't actually click the link and go through to the website. They just read the headline or read whatever someone's put about it and start angrily typing. So what they've introduced is that if you have a Facebook page for your business and you want to link out on a post to your website, your external website, all you need to do is verify your domain, which normally just involves putting a little bit of code on your on the website, usually just on the home page, and to verify that you own it. And then as soon as you do, then you can just carry on posting links out as per usual. But I mean, I'm involved in a few different kind of social media things that aren't just business related, and we haven't had any issues on posting links out to sort of various different websites and stuff. So I'm not sure, unless if you've got like an article where Facebook say that they'd sort of changed policy on it, then I'd like to have a look at it. But I've not heard anything on that level of them just sort of blanketly stopping people doing it.
And there's another question about Facebook, so I don't know if we see you. Kirk says, thoughts on Facebook baiting posts, asking to like, share and comment on posts. Allegedly pages will be fined by minimising reach for future posts. Is this true?
I wouldn't say it's true necessarily, but it is against Facebook's terms and conditions to ask for, not to ask for likes and shares, but like for things, if you run a lot of people used to run competitions and they'd say, like this post, share this post and comment on it, and to be in with a chance of winning. You're not allowed to do that anymore. I mean, one of the things that we suggest to everybody who's posting organically on their Facebook pages is to be very explicit with your calls to action. So if you want, if you're putting a post on and you want people to come through and buy something, then tell them, and tell them that you want them to come through to the website and book, or book a ticket online. Only takes 3 minutes. Just be very, very explicit and detail exactly what's going to happen. So I wouldn't say, I don't think, again, like, Facebook is quite Facebook itself and the people there don't really have a huge amount to do with how it actually handles everything. It's all just done by algorithms. So as far as I'm aware, they're not. Again, that's not something that's actually. It kind of makes sense for the way that it's worded as one of those things that, like, Facebook are changing stuff and they're going to wreck everyone's Facebook pages. But I don't. Again, I've not seen any kind of evidence of that. So again, I'd be interested if someone's got some kind of links to something or an article or anything like that. I'd like to look at it, but that's not my experience of it so far.
Finally, actually, we might as well stay with you, Adam, for this one. What are the implications of GDPR on social media tracking? Nadine.
Thanks, Nadine. it's difficult because the GDPR doesn't make any mention of it's. I think Facebook call it custom audiences. So you are but there's no personal identifiable information involved in it. So although you come to a website and you're tracked, there isn't any personal information involved in that transaction. So as long as you've got a banner on your website that says, I am happy to opt into marketing cookies, then they're opting into that whole process. I think that's where GDPR kind of interacts with it, because essentially by using Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, when you sign up for your account and you agree to their terms and conditions and you use it on an ongoing basis, you're at their behest on how they use your data. There's no, as long as they're complying with the GDPR from their point of view and what they're doing internally, then I can't see it having a huge impact. It will just be that because I've literally spent the last 3 or 4 weeks pretty much doing GDPR solidly, and I think it is just those opt-ins on the websites which I think will have an effect kind of in the short term. So I think people will maybe not start, they'll come to a website and maybe they won't tick the marketing box, but I think because everyone essentially has kind of got to start doing it after maybe a month or 2 or 3, enough people will be used to that being on every website that actually they know that and I mean, it's funny, once you actually talk to people about how the advertising systems work in Facebook, most people would actually see adverts for things that they would actually have a chance of buying, rather than just completely random products that somebody just wants to put in front of you to sell them. So it's kind of, I think it will have an effect, but it's very difficult to tell what that is, particularly because the ICO doesn't actually have an explicit kind of any references in there at all to how Facebook will handle it. They tell you as a business what you need to do in terms of giving people that option to opt in or out of it. But it doesn't really in it then define, other than what Facebook has to do as a data controller, it doesn't really then define how they use it for their advertising purposes. So it's a very long-winded way of saying I don't really know.
Brilliant, thank you. A lot of people are worrying about that at the moment. Val, I've got a couple of questions for you next, if that's okay. Andrew asks, I need to invest in a new website. What would you recommend, a loan or an overdraft?
Okay, so it all depends on if your business is established, because you want to kind of look at whether you can actually make the repayments on a loan, or whether you just want it for a short term. So if it's for an established business, clearly you'll be able to make the repayment. So you could just have it for a for 6 months. So in that sense, an overdraft would be sufficient. However, if it's a new business that's going to be rolled out, then it would be the preference to have a loan, because at least you know exactly how much you're going to be paying on a monthly basis on the repayment itself. So I think it all depends on what stage you're at in terms of your business model.
Okay, that's brilliant. The other question actually we've kind of covered already, so we can go back to that one. I have a few questions now from Laura. These are mostly for Adam, I think. The first one is, I want to grow my franchise, and part of this we want to grow the number of franchisees. Where do you suggest that I spend my time and budget? My target is mums. We're a kids-related franchise.
I think we've kind of covered pretty much what you'd need to do in looking at the targeting and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just in this specific instance, I think Facebook is probably the one to look at, purely because you can target target parents, and I mean, and depending on how old they would need to be, you can even target people who are expecting. So and obviously combined with their age and outside interests. So if it was something outdoorsy, you could look at maybe some big outdoorsy brands, and kind of target an ad for people with young kids who like those brands. I think Facebook would definitely be the place to look for in that case.
Okay, this is an interesting one actually. It's how often should you post out the same message on Twitter? We are new to Twitter and keep seeing some people putting up the same post many times. Is this good practice?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily good or bad. It kind of depends, because people very rarely will go to your actual Twitter page or your actual Facebook page and forensically go through each post to see if it sort of matches one from the day before or from a couple of hours ago. There's something called, I mean, this is more kind of relevant on Twitter, because there's something called it's a bit of a technical term, but it's like they call it the half-life of like social media posts. So it's like, when does half of the activity happen, and then when does the other half of the activity happen? And for most tweets, the first half of the activity happens within the first 25 to 30 minutes, and then the rest of the activity happens in the next 24 hours, like you're going down on the line of that. After 24 hours, there's nothing. So arguably, if someone was posting, I wouldn't say to post the same message every day, like more than once a day. But if it was at least once a day, that would be fine. And then I think it's definitely an automation thing. So if they are seeing that, I would imagine they'll have that person, whoever it is that's doing it, will have some sort of system in place. So they'll be using like Hootsuite or Sprout Social, or one of those kind of automated things. And it's a bit lazy doing it that way. But one thing you can do, and one thing we actually recommend, is if you have a really good piece of content on the website, so if you have a case study or a blog, you take that and then create maybe 6 or 7 different tweets. You can even take like kind of sentences from within the blog as tweets, or key points as tweets, and then link back to the same blog. So you can have 6 or 7 different messages that are posted out at different times that all link back to the same place. But you don't necessarily know, you can't see that just from looking at them, that they're going back to the same blog. So you can kind of use one destination, but lots of different paths into it. I would definitely suggest doing that rather than having exactly the same message being used again and again and again.
Yeah, really good advice. And that kind of links on to the next question, which talks about how you can manage social media so it doesn't eat up too much of your time.
Yeah, I think basically kind of just what I said with the systems before. One of the real key things to do if you're going to be more professional on it is using a service. So I mean, we use one called Agora Pulse, which kind of lets you post to different channels for different people, and in a very kind of efficient way, and you can see it over a calendar, and you can kind of adjust what you're doing quite easily. It's not cheap. I think it's about £170 a month. But we have used lots of different options, and including free ones, and have just, for the functionality that we specifically needed for that was the right one for us. I think the other thing, I mean, those systems will take the administrative load, so like just the actual, posting and putting in links and putting in images and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the kind of the interaction and looking at other stuff and commenting on other things, I think that the really important thing is just being really disciplined with it. And I think this is probably a bigger thing, not just in social media, but actually is just in business in general, is just saying, right, I'm going to commit half an hour every day to doing some really good, effective social media stuff. And I'm going to do that at 3 o'clock. And that's when I'm going to do that. And then if I get a message in the interim, or a lead, or someone comments on something asking for some business information, then obviously that's fine. That's critical to the success of the business. But in terms of the actual working on it, then I would define it and put it in, right, that's the block that gets done. If it needs to be more because there's more profiles, or you've got a really popular page or whatever it might be, then maybe there's one in the morning or one in the afternoon. But I think it's more just being really, really disciplined with it, and being very conscious of what is kind of doing effective things on it, and what is just getting pulled off into various different directions, because ultimately, like, social media is quite distracting, which is why it's so popular. I'd say that's the way to go.
Okay, that's brilliant. I know we've got some other questions, but I'm just really conscious of time. I've got one last one, and it says, I'm new to social media, but I'm learning fast to be cautious. Some people have strong opinions. If it happens, what's the best way to deal with negative comments?
I would just say I think there's a difference between a negative comment and someone being malicious. I think if it's very obviously somebody being malicious and just leaving a bad review or just leaving a nasty comment for no particular reason, that you can't attribute back to someone who's actually done anything with you, then I would just hide it so that they can see it, but nobody else can. If it's a genuine thing, so if someone's come and bought something and they've been a bit disappointed, or they came to a restaurant or they came to a lesson and they didn't enjoy it or didn't have a good thing, I would just be completely 100% honest and transparent and just go back to it. It's actually a brilliant way of showing what you're like to deal with as a business. So if someone's kind of researching you and looking at the things that you do and the things that you publish, and they can see on there that actually when someone did have a problem, you just went back and said, look, I'm really sorry that this has happened, please get in contact with us and we'll make sure that this gets sorted out. You're removing a hurdle. So whenever anyone's looking at using a business or service, like that's something you're going to want to know. If something goes wrong, what's going to happen, and to be able to see that kind of in like live in the cold light of day, then that can only be a positive thing.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I just want to say some fantastic advice and opinions from our expert. And I would just like to say a huge thank you for your time, and also to everyone for attending. And if there's any questions that we haven't got round to, we will try to follow up with those. And also, if anyone has any questions for me or how we can reach our audience, then please do contact me. The details should be appearing on the screen. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks.
Thank you.